Hello Misfits and welcome. In today's video, we're talking about why the process of balancing an encounter in D&D, kind of sucks. I'm sure you've been there. You've spent a lot of time trying to create the perfect encounter that strikes that balance between challenging and deadly and life-threatening and survivable and something that your players can be victorious in. And then the encounter plays out and it doesn't quite go according to plan. Either the players at your table totally steamroll all of your enemies, or it's almost a TPK. Well, some of that is due to the fact that, there's this sort of random factor to encounters in D&D that's left up to chance. And then some of it is because just the process of creating and balancing encounters is less than ideal. So we're going to talk about all of that and sort of break down what exactly goes into balancing an encounter and why that process just isn't working the way it probably should. We're talking specifically about 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, and I'm not trying to just dog on 5th edition. It's what I play in. I do enjoy it. It's done a lot of great work to streamline this system, this type of game, so that so many people can access it and get into it that have never played it before, but that doesn't mean it isn't without its flaws. So we're going to break down all of that right now. Before we get any further, I want to talk to you about Into the AM. Into the AM is a men's apparel brand that values self-expression and creativity. Since 2012, they have been creating premium apparel that elevates self-expression and just so happens to be extremely comfortable. They sell high-quality shirts, joggers, hoodies, and much, much more. They also have a couple of bundle deals going on right now. You can get 3 graphic tees for $61.95 or 3 basic tees for $52.95. They have graciously asked me to join their partnership program, which means that you can use the code Misfit to get 10% off your purchase. Using this code also helps me out, which is pretty cool. You can find the link for that 10% discount in my description down below. Into the AM really cares about its customers' satisfaction. They have a 30-day money-back guarantee, and they prize themselves on hassle-free returns and fast shipping. I personally really like their graphic tees. They have really creative and intricate designs that are eye-catching while still being really comfortable. Some of them really pop, like this one with the octopus on it, but they also have some that are a little bit more understated if that's more your vibe. So be sure to check out Into the AM and don't forget to use the code Misfit to get that 10% discount. Okay, to really understand the whole process of balancing encounters, we first need to understand what CR is. So balancing encounters has a lot to do with looking at the CR of all the different creatures. CR stands for challenge rating, and it tells you how challenging a creature is to face in combat. A kobold might have a challenge rating of 1/8, kind of telling you that it's not very tough, but a Tarrasque is going to have a challenge rating of 30, so it is extremely hard to defeat in combat. A lot goes into determining this number. The average damage output, the AC, the creature's proficiency bonus, how much health it has, and far more. I'm not going to go into all of that. It is very complicated and convoluted, and there's kind of a lot of math going on behind the scenes to come up with that. While this number is super great to have and gives you a rough idea of how challenging a creature is, it's specifically designed for measuring one monster against a party of 4 characters of equal level. Also, when balancing an encounter, they treat all 4 party members the same regardless of class. So you could have, a varied group of 4 of different classes, or you could have a group of 4 bards or 4 wizards. In terms of balancing the encounter, it doesn't matter, which is part of the problem. By itself, it's not exactly helpful for balancing an encounter where your party is battling multiple monsters. Also, its accuracy is kinda so-so. It's more of a ballpark. It's not really exact. Looking at you, Assassin Vine. Now, a lot of you probably don't sit down and build an encounter necessarily the way it's laid out in the book. You probably go to a website like Kobold Fight Club or D&D Beyond. That's totally fine. Those websites are just making the process easier. They are doing things by the book according to the DMG's rules. They're just doing a lot of the math and the hard part for you. It's just that the math, or the lack of specificity kind of in the math, is what the problem is. So I said it makes it difficult when you are having your characters face multiple monsters. So let's talk about why multiple monsters against your party screws everything up. 2 words: action economy. Action economy is looking at how much a character can accomplish in a single round of combat. This is what people don't always consider, but DMs with large tables can't afford to forget what action economy is and how it factors into literally everything. So, 4 characters taking 4 actions against 4 characters taking 4 actions is a totally balanced action economy. Everybody's taking the same number of actions, the same number of attacks, etc. Now, if you've got 4 characters taking 4 actions and 4 characters that have multi-attacks, so they're really taking like 8 actions, is going to tip in favor of that latter group. The individual CR of a creature somewhat accounts for this because it's factoring in their average damage output. But this gets lost in the shuffle when we start adding more monsters to the encounter. That CR number is just for that individual monster. It's not worried about all the other monsters fighting alongside it. There is currently no way to factor in the number of attacks everyone can make into the encounter balancing process. Now, you still might be thinking that this is not so big a deal, but let me give you some visuals so you understand what I'm talking about. Combat encounters are separated into 4 different difficulty classes: easy, medium, hard, and deadly. For this video, we are only looking at the medium difficulty. Alright, let's take 4 level 4 PCs and put them against 6 thugs, which have a CR of 1/2. This is considered to be a balanced medium encounter. And it kind of is, but I think it actually might end up being kind of difficult, and let's talk about why. Thugs have HP comparable to an average level 4 character. Thugs also get multi-attack, so the party is actually going up against 12 possible attacks. That's a lot. Let's look at another medium balanced encounter. 4 level 17 PCs versus 53 shadows. Now, shadow by itself is still just a CR of 1/2. Here's the thing about this. 1, the shadows, even though they don't have multi-attack, that's still 53 attacks versus our party of 4. Now, some of those party members might have multiple attacks, but some of them might not. Also, let's consider this. The shadow has a very special ability called Strength Drain. If the shadow hits, it does 1d4 Strength Drain, and this is to your strength score, not your HP. So level 17 characters might have a crazy amount of HP, but their strength is not going to be a ridiculous number. It's going to be, I don't know, probably 20 or less. If your strength reaches 0, you die. That's it. And what if 20 of these guys get to attack before you get a single turn? You're dead. So is this encounter actually balanced? No. But according to the process, the sort of like system we go through to create this encounter, it is. You see how this is not right and totally a problem? Alright, here's another encounter. We have 4 level 4 characters against 14 kobolds. This is also a balanced medium encounter. And maybe it actually is balanced, but what if instead of like a normal party that's, you know, a couple spellcasters, a tank, and a rogue, we have a party of 4 bards that roll up to fight this army of kobolds? And what if they all rolled poorly on initiative? Do you think that that encounter is going to feel balanced as well? Probably not. Your party could be grossly outnumbered by the enemies, and it will still show in the numbers that it is balanced. And that's wrong. It's because we can't account for all these different attacks. We just look at the base difficulty of the monster by itself, and according to this system described in the DMG, it should help you create an encounter that makes sense that your party might struggle with, but ultimately survive, and that is not always true. The DMG itself is kind of wishy-washy on the details of things. It talks about when you're making calculations that you just don't factor in some of the monsters that are way weaker unless you think they might pose a problem. So it's just sort of how are we calculating this number? If we can sort of pick and choose when we want to factor in the challenge rating of these different monsters into the fight, then nothing is concrete, nothing is consistent, nothing is certain. It's just kind of annoying. And they have different multipliers that you can use when you have numerous monsters in the encounter, but these still kind of make the encounter feel unbalanced. It doesn't always work out, especially when you get into those upper levels of play, because in the encounter with the 53 shadows, it's still using this multiplier, and we still end up with an absurd encounter that is quote-unquote balanced, but clearly isn't. And as described in the Bards versus Kobold fight, one of the other flaws to this that's contributing to this problem is the fact that the classes aren't really balanced against each other. We know that classes are not really equal across the board because if you put a kind of standard sort of spread of a party, like a wizard, fighter, cleric, and rogue, against a group of 4 bards, you would not consider them evenly matched. You just wouldn't. Even if you go through and you do the subclasses with the bards and you try to fill the holes that the other classes would normally fill, it's still not going to match that sort of balanced party. We're using the word balanced a lot in this video, aren't we? Some classes just are more optimized than others. You could put a warlock versus a wizard of the same level, and how well the other one does is going to depend on how often they've rested, if that warlock got to short rest after their previous encounter, how many spell slots are left. There's a lot that goes into what would help one beat the other, what would make one just as powerful or more powerful than the other. Also, action economy that we talked about earlier is different for the different classes. Some classes get to attack multiple times and some do not. Also, different classes get different features and abilities at different levels. Martial classes typically get their subclass at level 3, but spellcasters start with their subclass. There are a lot of differences between the classes, and in some ways that's really good. It is what sets the different classes apart from each other. We don't want them to all be the same, but at the same time, if it's causing some classes to feel much weaker than others, we have a problem here. I mean, there's a reason why a lot of people kind of dogged on the Ranger until they came up with some better subclasses like Gloomstalker. Another thing that's screwing up the balance process is the fact that the game really isn't designed for just individual encounters. It's designed for multiple encounters in a day. So the difficulty of a fight is just as much about how fresh you are as it is about the number of enemies that you're facing. I mean, think about all the things that resting affects: spell slots, magic item uses, your class features, and far more. And you can't really factor any of that into the process of balancing your encounter. And that really affects how difficult or easy a fight is going to be. And it even points out in the DMG that, having multiple encounters in one day, or having an encounter, a long time since they've rested, can affect the difficulty of the encounter itself, but there's no way to numerically factor that into the process. It just says, if you have multiple encounters in one day, those later ones are going to be tougher. And then that's literally it. That's all they say about that. And that's really frustrating. It leaves a lot to be desired. And probably the last thing that just makes this process of balancing an encounter so frustrating is the fact that it really isn't beginner friendly. In a D&D edition that has really, prided itself on being accessible and easier to understand, this process still isn't. If you're doing it by the book, you got a good bit of math that you need to do, and it's not always the easiest to understand. Maybe the process of putting the encounter together by itself isn't too bad, but if you're creating a monster and you have to determine what its CR is, that's not always easy, even with the websites and various applications that are going to try to help do some of that stuff for you. On top of everything else, the whole process kind of breaks down in its functionality and accuracy more so when you have more than a party of 4 or when you pass level 12. I DM a table of 7. I have to take everything with a grain of salt when I'm plugging stuff into Kobold Fight Club or D&D Beyond. A lot of times I end up trying to aim for the hard and deadly levels of difficulty because that actually ends up being more of a medium hard kind of difficulty for my group. And then when they get to that higher level of play, I'm almost always going towards the deadly levels of difficulty because that's the only thing that's going to be remotely balanced. The physical DMG, I didn't see it online, but the physical DMG also points out that their own system is flawed. It talks about an example with the Rakshasa and how it is a challenge rating of 13, and, Rakshasas are immune to spells that are 6th level and lower. And then it points out that spellcasters of 12th level or lower have no spells that would affect the Rakshasa. So it says that the encounter might be significantly tougher than it appears when you are balancing it out. So it even acknowledges that its own system is flawed. And there's lots of things that you can do with the action economy to kind of balance things out. If your enemies are being outnumbered by the party, at least just in the terms of actions and attacks that the party members can take, you could consider giving your enemy creatures legendary actions. Even though they aren't legendary creatures, this will give them a little bit more of a fighting chance. Something else you could do is you could spread them out within initiative so that it's not like a full wave of party members attacking your enemies. You can sort of spread them out within initiative so that a couple of the PCs go, then an enemy goes. Then a couple more PCs go, then an enemy goes, so on and so forth. Though if you are going to do that, I would check in with your players first. Don't, surprise them by that. Make sure that you're being fair and you're being honest. Maybe part of the problem is that the encounter balancing process has been simplified in a lot of ways, at least in terms of just taking your number of monsters against the number of party members. But there are things that maybe shouldn't be as simplified. The process of calculating the CR number is not simple, and yet after we've determined that and we get to this process of pinning the number of monsters against your party, it's super simple and we can't account for whether or not they've rested, how many spell slots they have, what classes they are. That seems like a bit of a problem. Should every single class be the exact same CR when we're trying to create an encounter? Probably not. That seems a little weird. There's just so many things that maybe they need to add to this process, but then at the same time I understand if we add more to it, then it becomes more complicated and that doesn't help. I don't know. I don't have a perfect solution for this, but I'm curious to hear you guys' thoughts. I'm also really interested to know if there are other systems that seem to have done this better and seem to have maybe learn from the mistakes of 5e, or they just went a totally different route and that has worked for them a little better than what's going on here. I would really like to hear what you guys have to say and what your experiences have been, because I know a lot of you play in different systems or have tried different systems, and I would really like to pick your brain about that. But yeah, in my experience of DMing and running games, for your normal size party and even the big ones, I just noticed that this whole process of balancing encounters, it's just not perfect. You can have an encounter that is balanced so to speak, but it really isn't. It's more nuanced than how it's described in the book and how it's laid out. And there's a lot of like, I don't know, you just have to test things out to figure out if it works. And it would be nice if there was just a little bit more explaining, or a little bit more in the description to help you create a balanced encounter without having to spend years of practice honing that skill and ability. You know, I shouldn't have to like fumble my way through 3 years of DMing before I finally figure out how to do this stuff, you know? That seems a little weird to me. But I hope you guys found this video enjoyable, and if you did, please feel free to like and subscribe, but more importantly, leave a comment down below. I definitely want to hear from you guys, and, you know, engaging with each other and engaging with me on this video is what helps other people see it, which is super important. But with all that said and done, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, a great rest of your week, and I will see you again next time. I just want to thank all you guys that, you know, took the time to wish me well and wish me a happy birthday. You guys are seriously, like, some of the sweetest people. I am always, like, baffled and somewhat surprised that I have any subscribers at all, let alone a group of people that just seem so incredibly nice. I don't know what I have done to deserve you, but I am very grateful that you are here and you seem to enjoy anything I have to say. But yeah, thank you. I did have a good birthday. You know, it's a little weird to be in your 30s, but it's also like not different at all. You know, it's not like you wake up when you're 30 and you're like suddenly an ancient being, you know, it's just another day. But it was a good birthday, and I'm super excited because I really only have 1 week of teaching left before I'm on summer break, and I am pumped for that. I'm ready to sleep in, I'm ready to play video games, I'm ready to read a book, watch TV, you know, do things like that. What are you guys' like favorite things to fill your time when you have, you know, a break, a vacation? You don't have to be anywhere, you don't have to go anywhere or do anything. What do you like to do to fill your time? I'd be interested to know. Anyway, have a good day, guys, and I'll see you next time.